It's in these strange crevices of history that we find stuff that now that we have a position where distillers can do stuff just for the sheer crack of it, just for the sheer joy, these are the places worth investigating, worth pursuing, this kind of like culinary birthright of the long history of Irish whiskey, you know, and it doesn't need to be commercially incentivized, it just needs to be fun and a bit of crack. And again, it wouldn't really matter if it had never been done, it'd still be great crack to do it, you know, but the fact that it was there and that it was in this kind of long memory of the soul of Irish whiskey, it certainly adds a certain romanticism to the idea of it being done again. It's funny that actually the most recent style of whiskey to Ireland is triple distilled single malt. That's only been around for, you know, triple distilled unpeated single malt is a 20th century thing, you know, and a lot of people assume that that is the tradition, where you had, again, that multi-granular stuff which could be double or triple distilled, and then you had that older peated malt illicit tradition that began to be commercialized in the kind of early modern period. So it's a weird kind of long look back to what might have been, what could have been, what ought to have been, you know, in a fairer, more beautiful, kind of slightly smokier world.
So the project came about, off the top of my head, 6 years ago. Nobody in Ireland was doing Irish peated whiskey. There's no facility to malt peated malt. The journey started with, first of all, trying to find a partner that would malt our single farm batches using Irish turf.
Unfortunately, we don't do any sort of peating in Ireland. It's not something that has been done for hundreds of years.
With our partner, Minch Malt, in Athy, the question was asked, and luckily enough, they had a maltings in Scotland that could do single farm batches using their peating facility in Glenesk.
They had been peating for years for Scottish whiskey. And for a lot of the famous peated distilleries up in Scotland. And so it started to form a plan, and we started to sit down and see what the art of the possible was.
It's part of the same foodway as the Highlands of Scotland kind of coming down. I mean, the north coast of Ireland, the Inner Hebrides, for up until relatively recently, spoke the same language. They traded quite heavily, and you see the same product go back and forth. I mean, peat is so integral to Irish rural life, it's almost absurd to think that it wouldn't have been there.
Firstly, it started with Dalton's in Kilkenny and the single farm origin project. We needed to harvest the barley, keep it segregated, but then on top of that then we had to do the same for the peat, because the guys in Waterford wanted it to not only be Irish barley but Irish peat that produced the peated malt.
The second part of the equation was trying to find Irish turf and having discussions with local bog cutters or turf cutters that they would supply us with turf for the peating of malt, which isn't done in Ireland. So a lot of closed doors, a lot of funny expressions when I explained what we wanted to do. Normally these guys were used to cutting turf, drying it during the summer and burning it in the winter to produce heat. So when you're going to these guys and saying, look, I want moist, wet turf with a lot of organic matter that will just produce smoke and not heat.
Literally scorching the last millennia of botanical history into the drink. It's amazing, and peat is the land. You just get sphagnum moss that stops it from properly decaying, and you're camping each layer of semi-decomposed sediment on top of the next, and they're pushing each other down. And you get this idea of wherever the peat was. The peat from the Midlands doesn't smell like the peat from Donegal, because it's all montane bog Midlands, and it's all blanket bog in up in Donegal. And depending on what was growing, you just get this very different flavour of gloop.
We eventually found a guy in County Kildare, Niall Carroll, and look, thanks to Niall's persistence with us, we finally got it right.
Well, I thought it was a wind-up, yeah, definitely thought it was a wind-up call, all right, yeah, you know, who wants a load of wet turf, you know, because traditionally what we dry, you couldn't have it dry enough for the people that we'd be supplying it then that wanted, because they wanted for their fire, they wanted for heat.
Yeah.
So for the smoking grain for whiskey, like, was alien to us. And we'd have deep bogs here in Kildare where we are, and then the more you head down west or that, like, there is deep bogs in it, but probably maybe more mountainous regions and pockets of it, and that would appear maybe a darker, blacker peat in it then as well.
And we supplied 50 tonnes of turf over to Scotland for the peating of our single farm batches.
It's romantic to think about, partly because it tastes so good and it smells so good, but it's also just, in principle, such strange stuff. And of course, Ireland is largely limestone and bog. It's a floating bog. Again, you know, back to Heaney, the wet centre might be Atlantic seepage. You know, you're never quite sure if the soil beneath this place is hard at all. You know.
So the single farms of batches are brought from harvest into Dalton's Cathedral, and then when it's ready to be malted, instead of sending to Athy to be malted, it's sent over here to Glenesk with X amount of turf for the peating process.
We shipped a single farm over in 3 loads, straight from Dalton's to the site here in Glenesk. And then the barley went through the process, the steeps that we saw earlier on, germination drums, then into the kiln.
The steep tanks here is where we put the barley in. The barley sits up here for 2 days, and we submerge it in water 3 times. So we've got the water in the grain, and here you can see the roots, the chit as we call it, starting to grow. So the barley started to grow before it goes down into the germination. The steep tanks that we were just at are gravity fed down to the drums. It's now in germination for 4 days. During the germination period, the air is taken in from the vent. It sits still for most of the time, but it turns periodically every sort of 10 to 12 hours. But as we're in summer and it's warmer, we tend to turn them out every 8 hours just to keep the grain at the right temperature. The malt that was in the drum is fed down the belt underneath, up the elevators and then into the top of the kiln here. The malt bed depth is 1.2 metres and it's on here for 21 hours drying time. So from taking the barley in at 12% moisture, we've gone to 44% moisture coming from the steeps, and then that's drying it down, basically killing the grain, stopping it growing anymore, but preserving the enzymes for distilling.
The bed of malt will be across the floor.
That's right.
Seal the floor, and then smoke will come up through it.
That's right, yeah. So for the peating, before the 21-hour drying cycle starts, we do a 12-hour peating period where smoke is blowing through the bed, drawn from the furnace outside, and it's just purely the fan on. It will dry slightly because of the heat from the peat, but it's not really part of the drying process. It's really there just for the smoke going through and flavouring the malt. Yeah.
Old hand, you learn it, you never forget it.
The team that run the furnaces here talk about the differences from the Scottish here on the left and the Irish here on the right. The Irish one, obviously much darker in colour, but it also has a hell of a lot more organic matter in it.
In the turf that we were looking for, like, you wanted that moisture, so you can see the outer crust has to be solid, damp, wet, for that causes the smoke. So it'd be interesting to see the flavour profiles. I'm sure the difference in turf, depending on where they cut it on the bog as well, what level as well, also impacts your smoke and flavour.
For the first 12 hours of the kilning, they pass smoke through the malt bed to impart those phenols. And it was really interesting to see, because I suppose in my mind I had something really kind of technical and scientific, and it's more of an art form. The way the guys manage the fire, that it creates the smoke but doesn't extinguish the fire. They'll man that for 12 hours, and it's a real skill, and it's incredible to see.
Definitely some different characteristics in the Irish peat to the Scottish peat that we normally use. It was almost marine-like. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was almost like salty sea air type smell compared to purely sort of smoke that you'd expect from people burning peat at home coming out their chimney. When you
burn the peat, you create phenols, and there's many phenolic compounds that make this up. Creosol, guaiacol, several others. These combined give you a total phenol level. These compounds are what give you the characteristics on peated malt. So certain compounds will give you a smoky sort of taste. And then if you think of some other whiskies that are like TCP, medicinally, iodine, these different compounds affect the way the peat makes the whiskey taste.
Peat is such a visceral tap to the bloodstream, to the hardwire of your memory. You know, it's a really kind of mythopoeic experience. You know, dare I romanticize it too far?
We will not lose our fingerprint on the style of spirit, so it'll have that single farm terroir effect by using Irish turf as well. So it should give you obviously the smokiness from the phenols, but you'll also have the terroir effect from the single farms. It's sent back over to Ireland, to distillery, for us to bring it through the brewing, fermentation and distillation process. So that's similar. So the two batches were brewed, fermented, distilled separately, put into the casks and left mature. So the only difference was that these ones were peated. It's left for minimum 3 years. We choose to leave it 3.5 years, and Ned will put them together as he does all the single farm batches, the 4 different types of cask, your first fill US, your virgin US, your VDN and your French casks. 4 of those are put together and bottled as a single peated malt.
So look, we'll give you a taste of it now. You're after waiting 5 years now for this. So that's from your own bog. Smokiness is from your own bog coming through in it.
Yeah, there's kind of a little bit of a smoky flavour, yeah. They go up on a like a bacon fries or something.
That's it, yeah. And that's it. It's a subtle, so this one is a subtle smokiness, right?
Oh, you can taste the smoke.
Yeah, very evident, isn't it?
Oh, Lord, yeah.
The single farm batch, where that barley was grown, flavours from that barley are still coming through that one.
Yeah,
so you have
God, you can read even the aftertaste of it there.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So what we'll do now is we'll do a little comparisons. We're going to do Fenniscourt, Jarraburn batch of barley. So this wasn't as peated as much now as this one, so a little bit lighter, so it should be a little more flowered, fruity coming through in this. So not as, the peat isn't
Yeah,
as
it's
strong
not
on
as
it.
strong on it, yeah. Jesus, it's very, like a big difference really, is there?
Do a little taste there and we'll see.
I'd say that's strong, it tastes stronger, that does now.
On the nose, this one isn't as strong on the peat, but when you taste it, those phenols are coming right through.
Just on a cold day, that'd warm you to your toes.
So subtle differences between the two.
Oh God, there is, yeah. By God, there is. There's no doubt. Do you know what's in my glass now?
Hot strength it is.
No.
Go on.
Dust.
That's it from there. So it's getting that extra bang of
peat, yeah.
fresh peat from behind us.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Wowzers, yeah. It's still not on us, these sods. Have to do something with our machines, not putting out perfectly level sods.